Hello and welcome to another interesting and exciting session today. Today we will be talking about the five forms of abuse that can harm your child. Five forms of abuse that can harm your child, and you may not even be aware of it. Thank you so much for joining me in this session. I'm really happy and excited that you're taking out time out of your very busy schedule to listen to this session, and I really hope that at the end of the day it will have been profitable and highly informative and beneficial to you as well. Let me just say that this is an awareness training session on the emotional well-being of your child. So just sit down and relax and enjoy this session as we go through together. I want to start with a story. The story of a lady called Elizabeth. Elizabeth is 64 years old, and she says that at 64, I still find it hard to believe that I'm a beautiful woman. Elizabeth's story is one that is so touching and gives a lot of pain and concern as she goes through the kind of experience she had living with her mom. Time will fail me to go into all the details of the experience this lady had, but one striking thing is the harsh words that her mom spoke to her repeatedly as a child. She says that those words continue to ring in her mind. Every day she was told, you are ugly and you are dumb. I tell you, those negative words led to self-doubt, led to a feeling of low self-worth, until she became convinced in her mind that she was truly ugly. Elizabeth eventually got married to a man who never cared about her, to a man who perpetuated the pain and the cycle of verbal abuse and physical abuse and repeatedly cheated on her. The marriage didn't work. They separated, and Elizabeth was only able to find her life back several years later, after several sessions of counseling, of therapy, and of care by some loving people. Trust me, the scars from the deep wounds still persist in the mind of Elizabeth. I think many of us will agree as parents that child abuse is harmful, that child abuse is destructive, that it breeds a feeling of powerlessness, a feeling of non-ownership of the body and of the mind in the victims. Victims of child abuse or any form of abusive behavior tend to give out a sign that shows that they are afraid, or a sign that shows that they are vulnerable or they are weak, and this gives them away very easily to the predator, to the bully. It might be in a marriage relationship, it might be in the work environment, it might be in the school environment. The bully or the predator easily finds out that this guy is weak, this lady is feeling very weak, and she's afraid, and unfortunately they take advantage of them in a very annoying way. Whether it's physical abuse or verbal abuse or sexual abuse, experience and research both agree as to the dangers and the negative effects that it holds on the victims of the abuse. Hello and welcome once again to this session. My name is Dr. Olanrewaju Boyede. I'm the CEO of Well and Wealthy Consultants. Our mission and vision is to build healthier lives and to help families thrive. This presentation aims to raise up the awareness among parents and among teachers as to what child abuse is, especially emotional child abuse, and how we can all play a role in protecting our children. My intention in this session is to encourage parents in particular, as well as teachers in general, to parent kids, to mentor kids with a future in mind. I want to work with you so that you can empower and prepare your kids for a successful and a healthy life in the future. Stick with me as we run through this session together. As we talk about child abuse, a lot of parents tend to focus on things like corporal punishment, and that's very, very, very serious and important. Sometimes we focus on sexual abuse, and that's another big area. Sexual abuse, sexual coercion, those are areas that many times we focus on as parents. But guess what? Negative words also can be a means of abuse to young people, and in fact to anyone. Negative words tend to stick longer than the positive words we hear. If you look back at your basic education days, you are much more likely to remember the negative words that were spoken to you, maybe by a teacher, or maybe by your colleagues in the playground, or maybe by your parents, as in the case of Elizabeth. And you remember those words more than the positive words that you have heard. In fact, you can still recall the sense of shame or the pain that those words caused you at that time. You can still remember who was there, who said what, and who laughed when those words were uttered. Negative words in the human mind is like a room that is filled with smoke. What happens? It chokes the people inside the room, and it affects their visibility as well as the ability to enjoy the environment. In the same way, those negative words choke the positives, the strengths, and the values, and all of that in the minds of the victims. And you will need a lot more nurturing, a lot more validation, and sometimes therapy in order to get them out of the mind. So that is why I'm focusing your attention on these forms of abuse that is more subtle. These forms of abuse that appears to be insignificant but is at the same time harmful to the well-being of your child. Now you may want to ask me the question, say, okay, so who is responsible for this abusive behavior? Who are the perpetrators? Who are the people who cause this kind of abuse in the life of our children? I mean, it's not something that many parents want to admit to, that they would deliberately abuse their kids. But I want to just say at this time that anyone can actually perpetrate this form of abuse. Whether you're looking at your spouse in a marriage relationship, or the house help that comes into your house to clean and to work with your children, or it may be the teacher in the school environment, or maybe the youth worker in the church or religious gathering. Relatives that come to stay with your children, or your kids go on holiday. They go to have a nice time with other kids, and then they experience things that they cannot easily describe. And sometimes this abusive behavior is something that is perpetrated unknowingly, and they may think, oh, we're trying to make you strong, we're trying to make you develop thick skin, but they are traumatic and they are weakening to the fabric of the child. And you want to ask again, why exactly will anybody abuse a child? Well, couple of reasons that I want to just highlight here. One is the fact that some may abuse children when they are stressed. You find out that kids who grew up in blended homes, and you find one spouse coming from a marriage relationship, marrying another spouse from a previous marriage relationship, that kind of situation, which has been a stressful one for both parties, may be a reason why either of the spouses may start to abuse the kids, or sometimes the kids may have learning disabilities, and one spouse is just not able, one of the parents is not able to adjust well to the fact that, oh, we've got this child who has got some learning disability, or has got a cerebral palsy, or any of those problems that affect the learning ability of the child, and you find that parent may actually be abusive, because of the stress of taking care of the child and handling all the demands of caring for the needs of that child. And at other times, it may be stress in the workplace, stress in the marriage relationship, issues in between the parents themselves, or problems with the extended family, and those stresses can make them to transfer some of the pressure on the innocent child. And you find out that financial pressure is also some kind of stress that lots of parents go through today, and when they are not able to resolve how to handle it, it might reflect in the way they talk to young people and the way they talk to children. The other factor here is poor parenting skills. And when you talk about poor parenting skills, you want to look at the fact that none of us comes into the world with a parenting manual. At least I didn't come with any. And when you pass through school, or the university, or anywhere you go to, nobody actually gives you a manual. When you have your first baby, you're so excited, but nobody tells you these are the things to do, these are the things not to do. So you just try out all kinds of things on your own. And if you have grown up in an abusive family yourself, a home where you were never really shown love, a home where, a dysfunctional home, parents were never there, you grew up with a uncle, you were molested sexually, or you were harassed physically due to some problems that you had with learning or with behavior, or maybe a physical disability or whatever, you find out that you are much more likely to abuse children, or maybe your own child, unknowingly, unintentionally, because that is what you have experienced, and that is probably all that you think you know how to do in terms of caring for your child. So again, stress is a major factor, poor parenting skills is another factor, and the history of child abuse in either parent is also a major factor. And don't forget that anyone can do it, and sometimes they do it unintentionally because they do not have the skills of working with children and young people, or they assume that the same way they converse with adults is the way that you talk to children, or they assume that children, they don't remember anything, so you can handle them anyhow. And those are some of the reasons why this kind of harmful behavior still occurs till today. Now we're going to move on to the effects of child abuse, verbal abuse, and as I'm talking about the effect of emotional child abuse here, we've already talked about them, but let me highlight a few things that some studies say. It says that this type of abusive behavior, emotional abuse, has been linked to a threefold risk in mental health problems in adulthood. In fact, another research shows that the effect of psychological abuse and child neglect can be so deep and so long lasting, ranging from problems with the way the child's brain develop, his brain doesn't develop properly, or he could have problems with growing up well, or he could have problems with his behavior. You find out that that child starts to behave in a way that people will say, didn't they train this child at home? Where are his parents? Why is he behaving like this? Expressing characters and disposition that is not normal with the family or with the society. And you find also that the child have problems relating with others within the clan, within the community as well. So overall, repeated exposure to these subtle forms of abuse is harmful to the child's confidence, is harmful to the child's self-worth. You don't even have to eat to hurt the child. And, kids that experience this kind of abuse, you may not see any physical sign on their body. No bruises, no burns, no scratch marks. You may not meet them, with swollen limbs or whatever, but internally, the fabric of their being have been crushed. In fact, the American Humane website has this to say: an infant who is severely deprived of basic emotional nurturance, even though physically well cared for, can fail to thrive and eventually die. Babies with less severe emotional deprivation will start to show signs of insecurity, signs of anxiety, and some of them will be slow to develop and will also have a low self-esteem. I want you to stick with me today as we run through some of these emotionally abusive behavior that can harm your child and some tips on what you can do to prevent it. The first we've got here on this list is ridicule and humiliation. Ridicule and humiliation. When I talk about this, you're really just looking at using demeaning remarks in front of your child's peers or his teachers. So you're talking to your child and you're making fun of the way he speaks, making fun of the shape of his head. And this happens in the school environment as well, or making fun of the child's weight. Maybe the child is on the obese side, or the child is, on the weight, or the child is supposed to have experienced puberty, but there is some delay in pubertal signs, and you start making ridicule and jest of the child as a result of that, saying things like, you dumb fellow, or in some local parlance, olodo, fat zero, or you call the child a big for nothing child, and making all those kind of abusive words because you want to humiliate the child in front of his peers. You're making fun of the child's appearance or the child's performance, and you want the child to feel so little. You want him to feel as if he's a nobody because he has not done too well in school, or because he does not have the look of some other kids in your own family or in the neighborhood, something that the child probably doesn't have control over. And even sometimes the school performance thing might just mean that the child's learning style has not really been discovered. Maybe the child is a visual child, or he learns more in terms of the way the things he hears or the stuff that he does with his hands. So we've not really found out the child's learning style, and is not really picking up with the method in use in school, and we take it out on the child, embarrassing the child and trying to humiliate the child. That is abusive, that is traumatic to a lot of young people. And I tell you, many kids that have this experience will eventually drop out of school, or if they don't drop out of school, many of them may not really be able to maximize their potential, because those negative words that they hear very early in the nursery school days, in the primary or the basic education days, stick with them for many years and keeps pulling them short anytime they want to make a break in life. Anytime they want to step the game higher, those words replay in their mind like Elizabeth experienced. Even in their old age, they find it very difficult to get those kind of words out of their mind. So the first one here is ridicule and humiliation. Now this second one is closely related to it. It's more of controlling the child by using shame or guilt. So it's not just making the child feel humiliated, but now you're trying to control the child by making the child feel guilty. So if the child still bedwets, for example, and it's not been properly toilet trained, or maybe there may be some stressors within the marriage, within the home, that's still making that child to wet the bed in the night. And the parent now starts taking that out on the child, saying, "Oh, you're still wetting the bed at your age? What a shame! What a shame!" I mean, you can't even answer that simple question that your kid brother answered very easily yesterday. You are such a dumb and stupid child. You have wasted all my resources sending you to school, getting a teacher to teach you at home, and doing all of that, and this is all that you can bring out of it. And when we say those kind of words, we're saying those words to make the child feel guilty. Now, if you look at it, sometimes some kids are not well motivated. I quite agree with that. But it's not the same for all children. For example, some kids have problems with learning again, not exactly in terms of their learning style, but in terms of their level of intelligence. And some kids are late developers, while others are early bloomers. So while you may have the kid brother doing so well at age 5 or 6, he may be age 7 or 8 and still be struggling with certain subjects that his brother is doing very well with. So trying to use shaming or trying to make the child feel guilty for that, it's not really healthy for the well-being of that child. We need to find out what are the areas where he's having problems, and he may have intelligence in some other domains that we're not even looking at and announcing at all, but we're just focused on that area that we think it's all in all and it's not doing well in, and we're making the child feeling guilty about it and trying to control the child with that experience. I read a story about a lady. Her name is Shola. She's 18, and she says that my mom calls me names and makes me feel bad about myself. She blames things on me and takes out her anger from every other area of her life out on me. I don't think it's fair, but I also don't know how to get her out of my life. Controlling the child by shame or guilt is another abusive behavior that is not good for the well-being of your child. Let's move on now. A third on the list here is conveying to the child that the child is not good enough. Making the child feel that no matter how much you try, you're not good enough. And this is sometimes as a result of some prejudice. This may be coming from a teacher who is maybe of another racial background or from another ethnic group, and this teacher wants to make the child feel, oh well, in this class is only kids from my own clan, from my own ethnic group, or from my own race that can do exceptionally well. So if you are from another background, you are not going to be able to outperform kids from our own ethnic group or racial group or whatever. So in very subtle ways, such teachers, and even unfortunately some parents in blended homes, for example, may also do this as well. When you have kids from a former previous marriage and then from a new marriage, and then you find out that the mother or the father in that relationship may subconsciously or indirectly convey to the kids from the other marriage that, well, you're making a lot of effort, but you can't really sing and dance as well as my kids, or when my kids dress up, they look a lot better, more attractive, much more glamorous than you, and no matter how much you try, I don't think you can really do so well in that competition, in that event you're preparing so hard for. And just in a very subtle way like that, through words, through non-verbal communication, they send a feeling of self-doubt into the child. A feeling that you're not good enough no matter how much you try, or maybe because they just like another kid better in the class and they just favor that child. And sometimes in the home too, parents may like one child more than others, and then when they see one that is trying to come up and I'll do the one that they like. They start sending these subtle messages that your best is not good enough. Your performance, your effort is not going to get you far enough. And that is abusive. And that in itself is traumatic to the child's growth and emotional development. So the first one is ridicule and humiliation. The second here is controlling the child with shaming or guilt. And then the third on this list here is conveying that the child is not good enough. The fourth on this list now is invalidating the child's feelings or the child's thoughts. Invalidating the child's feelings or the child's thoughts. So it's more of the child says something and you try to discredit it, or you try to make it feel as if you don't know anything. Keep quiet. When I'm talking, you don't talk. Or maybe the child is complaining about, feeling cold, or complain that he's not feeling too well. You say, no, stop saying that. That's what you always say every time. Nobody's feeling cold here. If you are feeling cold and something is wrong with you, go out and get some things done, or go out and play with your friends, or you say things like that. And the child starts to doubt his feelings, or the child starts to doubt his thoughts, or the child starts to feel maybe my opinion never really counts, my voice never really counts. And then he gets to school, he finds it difficult to express himself in the class or in the community or in a social gathering, because his thoughts or his feelings have never really been listened to, have never really been validated. It may just be a 5-year-old crying because of a missing doll, and then the dad walks in and says, is that why you are crying? Just because your doll is missing? My friend, you better go and sit down and read your book. Why are you crying because of the ordinary toy? Is that enough reason for you to cry? And we forget that what matters to children is different from what matters to us. Rather than helping the child to go through those feelings and to healthily disconnect from those feelings, we truncate the validity of our child's feelings and a sense of empathy for issues that are of relevance to her at that stage of her development. So invalidating our children's thoughts and feelings is a form of abusive behavior that may not look so big, like I said, but is not healthy for their well-being. The final one on my list here is ignoring or neglecting your child. Ignoring or neglecting your child. This may not take place in the home environment, but it may take place in the daycare, under the nannies, in the crèches, where mothers go to drop their babies when going out to work, and you may find kids there crying and they are not being looked after. They may have health concerns, they may need to have their diapers changed, and nobody is really looking out for them. Sometimes these babies are given, sedatives, drugs to make them just sleep off so that they don't cry so often. And that kind of neglect, when the child is crying or when the child is in need, is also not healthy for the child. And it's not only babies that can be neglected, even younger children can be neglected as well. You find children born out of wedlock being neglected, as a result of something that is not in any way their fault. The father just doesn't want to see that child. The mother also just doesn't want to see the child. Both parents are now remarried in some new relationships, and the child is completely ignored, completely neglected. 21-year-old Lamiu says, I cannot recall one moment where my aunt, who I lived with, ever willingly spent one day with me, bought anything for me, held my hands, or showed me any affection whatsoever. It ought really bad to remember that I was emotionally neglected. So here you have all the 5 forms of abuse that can hurt your child. And the first one that we've talked about is ridicule and humiliation. Secondly, we've talked about shaming and guilt. Third, we've talked about conveying that your child is not good enough. Number 4, invalidating your child's thoughts or feelings. And finally, ignoring or neglecting your child. Now, that's not an exhaustive list. We just ran through that 5. Now, we'll just touch on some things you can do to protect your child from these forms of abuse. And number 1 is set clear rules on behavior and disciplinary measures. Set clear rules on behavior. If you're a proprietor listening or a teacher, you need to set clear rules on disciplinary measure within your school environment. You don't want any angry teacher or any angry boy or senior in the school taking laws into their hand and abusing innocent children because of their personal emotional weakness. They've got a problem with anger, or they've got unresolved crisis or stress in their various homes. They now come to the school environment and they vent this anger on innocent children for no just cause. So you need to set clear rules there on what is acceptable behavior and the disciplinary measures. So it might be things like every behavioral problem should be discussed with you first. So you're a parent, you've got a nanny, you've got a house help, you want to let them know if this child does anything that makes you unhappy while I'm away, you must tell me first on the phone, or you must wait till I come back. Never at any time try to implement discipline on any of my children when I am away from the home. That is very, very important. And then you need to clarify what is inappropriate. Okay, so you don't want them calling your kids any name that you have not given them out of annoyance, calling them any kind of abusive name out of anger. It may even be in their own local language. If you hear it, you need to stop them and find out what is that, what exactly are you trying to call my child. If it's something abusive, you need to address it immediately. And you don't also want any form of shaming behavior at all. Maybe the child still wets the bed, or the child, when he speaks, his words are not very clear, or the child can't speak English fluently, or he has a problem with writing, he has problems recalling things that he's learned at school, whatever. You don't want any form of shaming for those kind of problems. Those problems are things that can be addressed, and the child can overcome them, with lots of focused help there. The second thing there is, if the person is not happy with the child and cannot discipline the child immediately, let him take 5 to 10 minutes away from the child. Just take some time to cool off and relax, and take some time to get the issue out of his or her mind, so that he doesn't just bottle up that pressure there. Take some time away, relax and calm down, reassess the situation, and not just act immediately on impulse. And the third one is, of course, if they need to apologize to the child, if they have handled the child wrongly, then that has to be done. Now, having said that, some parents may now feel, okay, don't talk to my child, don't destroy my child's self-esteem, and they leave the child uncorrected. That's another extreme. So you want to address the behavior that needs correcting whenever you are on ground. And there are a couple of techniques you can use. You may want to enforce a timeout on the child. You may want to use natural consequences there, or withdraw some privileges there. You just want to own up your own parenting skills and find out which one will work depending on the age of the child or the particular behavior that you are trying to address. So you want to ensure that you don't allow a wrong behavior to persist in the child because you're saying, oh, I don't want you to abuse my child, and then the child starts going haywire and then taking that kind of behavior to the school, to your community, and people start asking questions. Why is this child this way? Why is it so disrespectful? Why does it talk anyhow? No, you want to address the wrong behavior, but in a healthy way, in a balanced way that will help the child really learn the key lessons of life. Now, the final point I've got here, after you've set clear rules on behavior and discipline in the home, in the school, you've addressed the behavior that needs to be corrected. Again, whether it's in the school or in the home, that has to be addressed. The third thing here is you need to get professional help where required. And if the child is having a persistent behavioral problem, and some kids have that, it may be as a result of underlying health issue that they've got. You need to ensure that that also is addressed. You need to ensure that that also is taken care of. So you don't want to leave that unaddressed. So get the child to see a therapist or a developmental pediatrician or a child psychologist as required. Or if it's your staff or if it's your spouse that is having a lot of stress or is having maybe a borderline personality disorder, and you have known it not just in the way he or she handles children, even in some other relational issues, you need to get some help for that person as well. So the third on the list therefore is getting professional help, and it's something you can do and you really need to do in order to make the world of your children and others around you a safer and a healthier one. Thank you so much for sticking with me in this session today. I would like you to leave your comments. I really want to know what you think about this training, what you've learned. I really hope it's been beneficial to you. And if you have other ideas, suggestions, or maybe even some questions, you want to leave those comments for me, and I will personally respond to those comments. And don't forget to share this training as well to other parents. It's an awareness training. We just want to get the buzz going out there so that we can raise healthier kids, wealthier kids who can, take care of our society, take care of our community, and make sure that we retain the values and the joy and the success that we all share together as our people. And don't forget also to hit the like button, like our page on Facebook, and like the article, and keep sharing it as well. Thank you, and bye for now.